Hi, everyone. Thanks for joining us today on our key insights from Clio's 2021 Legal Trends Report. We're going to wait just a minute or two to let the last few people join us here. So we'll get started in about 1 minute, but you are in the right place. All right, everyone. We're at 12:01, so I will get us started with a few housekeeping before we do introductions. We'll get started with a few housekeeping notes.
Hi, everybody. So we're using Zoom for today's presentation, and there are two things that you need to know to get the most out of it. The first is that your chat feature is automatically set to speak to us, the panelist, but it's actually much better if you change that setting to all panelists and attendees. And the reason we recommend that is it allows us to have a conversation, not just us to you, but with everybody here sharing tips and tricks and wisdom and questions together. So please go ahead and change that setting now. The second thing is that you have three buttons at the bottom of your screen: chat, raise hand, and Q&A. Chat should be for those kinds of mass messaging, great conversations that we want to be having with you. Raise your hand if you're having technical difficulties, and our volunteer support specialist will help walk you through some of the common solutions to problems that you might be experiencing. The last is the Q&A button. If you have a question that you want Dennis and I to address, please type it in the Q&A button. That way it doesn't get lost in the chat. So we really appreciate if you use the Q&A button for that. There are a couple of questions that we always get. The first of which is, yes, you will get a copy of today's presentation. We'll be sharing the slides and a video recording and a follow-up email. It's usually 1 to 2 business days after the end of today's presentation. So you will get a copy. Second, we'll happily address your questions, but if we run out of time, we might take it offline and respond via email or anything like that. So make sure you've got your information as a part of your registration, or you include it in a question that you ask. And last is just to sit back and enjoy yourself, because we'd like to have a learning conversation today. So if you want to jump into the chat, tell us where you're joining us from. I'm joining from Vancouver, Canada, for example. And with that simple housekeeping out of the way, let's begin.
Thank you, Joshua. Until you've done this once or twice. I think we'll start with a brief introduction. So I'll be your host today. I'm Dennis Stimka, the founder and CEO of Uptime Legal. By way of background, my role and my team here at Uptime's role is to help law firms leverage technology to better manage and grow their practice. And we do that in a variety of ways. We do that, of course, with one-on-one relationships with our clients. We do that by providing a suite of services of ours to clients, often by way of recommending other third-party services to clients. And of course, we do that by way of things like this, right? Broader communication content, like today's virtual meetup. My guest today is Joshua, the lawyer in residence at Clio. Joshua, why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself?
Thanks. So I am Joshua Lennon, the lawyer in residence at Clio. It's a made-up title. What I do is I help translate technology to lawyers and vice versa, translating the needs of lawyers in the legal industry back to technology companies. It's something I've been doing for close to a decade now. I'm very active on social media. You can find me on Twitter at Joshua Lennon, one word. And you can also feel free to connect with me on LinkedIn. I really hope that this is the beginning of conversations where I learn from you and figure out better ways to represent you within Clio. I am an attorney admitted to the New York bar, and I'm trained in international and comparative law, as well as being a privacy professional with the International Association of Privacy Professionals. So a lot of my job is making sure that the needs of lawyers and clients are represented within the legal technology industry. And it's a real pleasure to be here today.
Excellent. So for context, we'll both provide just a little bit of background on our companies, on Uptime Legal and on Clio. So for the Uptime side, I expect most of you joining us today know who we are, but just in case not. Again, today's virtual meetup is being hosted by us at Uptime Legal. Broad strokes, we're a legal technology company. Our offerings include cloud and technology services, all to law firms, document and email management services, again, exclusively to law firms, as well as digital marketing. for law firms. So we like to say that we handle and help law firms on the manage side and the grow side of their practice. We're about 40 team members big. Our headquarters is here in sunny Minneapolis, Minnesota, although we also have a pretty big team in Canada as well. And for my closing bullet, and my favorite one, we, Uptime Legal, have been named to the Inc. 5000 list of fastest growing private companies in America for the past 8 consecutive years.
That's amazing. Congratulations.
Thank you. We're very proud of that. We're very proud of that. Joshua, tell us a little bit about Clio for those of us joining who maybe don't have the full picture.
Yeah, so I'm really lucky and proud to be working at Clio. We are a Canadian-based company, but we actually have Clio users in 90 countries around the world, the United States being our largest and our target marketplace. We currently have about 150,000 legal professionals using Clio all around the world. Again, the majority of those in the United States. We've been endorsed by 65 plus bar associations and law societies around the world. We're also in close to 300 different legal education programs, supporting both experiential learning in their clinics and in their classroom settings. And we've got about 700 plus employees now. I think we're actually creeping up on 800 right now. That's our goal for the end of the year. But what do we do? If we could go to the next slide. Clio is a cloud-based suite of software for law firms. And the one that you probably are most familiar with is Clio Manage. It's a legal practice management solution. We tell everybody it takes care of everything from intake to invoicing. So you can store and access and utilize your contacts, your cases, your time tracking, your billing, your trust accounting, all in one simple solution that's available across all of your devices, your laptop, your desktop, your mobile phone. We even have built apps for your clients to interact with their files in your Clio Manage software. And that's something we'll take a look at a little bit later. We also offer Clio Grow. It's a client intake and legal customer relationship management software, which enables you to track your business development, where your client's coming from, what stage are they from potential client to actual client. And together, these are the legal suite where you can actually integrate Clio Grow and Clio Manage together as a seamless whole. What I think is also really interesting about Clio is we're not limited to these two pieces of software, but instead we partner with a wide variety, over 200 different legal software offerings out there, actually plug and play with Clio. And one of the great things about Uptime Legal is they help you design your perfect constructed law firm by taking Clio's extensibility and the other great tools that Uptime manages and puts them together in a recipe that's perfect for your law firm.
Absolutely. That's what we say we do here is we help law firms build that ideal law office in the cloud. Absolutely.
Perfect.
A variety of tools and services. So now that we've got those intros done and kind of some background on the companies, really the impetus for today's virtual meetup or today's interview is this. So earlier this year, we at Uptime Legal got our hands on the most recent Legal Trends report, which if you're not familiar, Clio publishes every year. And this year's report, maybe more than any preceding year, for me personally, I think for us here at Uptime Legal, was really eye-opening. Every year is good. This one, something struck a chord. The entire report is excellent, but a handful of specific trends really caught our attention. So we reached out and invited Clio to come and to talk to us about it a little bit and unpack some of those trends, help us interpret some of those trends, and really drill down into what they mean for the current and the future of law practice. So that's what we're here to do. So today we'll cover what we found to be most interesting, what trends are eye-opening, what actions can come from those. I certainly encourage everyone attending, if you haven't already, to get your copy of this year's Legal Trends report, and we'll provide links at the end.
And I'd like to point out that this is actually our 6th annual edition. We've been publishing this since 2016. Each edition of this report actually has a little bit of a different information. We research some different questions, we expand on the previous years. And so while we're going to kind of scratch the surface of our 6th report this year, I do want to recommend that if you have the time, swing by clio.com/LTR and download the various versions that we've got. And they're all for free. You don't have to be a Clio user. And it's just our way of making sure that the industry knows the trends that are happening and how you can adjust your law firm to them. An example I like to give is our 2019 report took a look at phone and email communications for law firms and how responsive are you versus the expectation of your clients. You're going to find there's a huge mismatch there. And that's a point that's still valid today. And so please swing by, check those out. I'd like to tell you a little bit about how we get the information that goes into the Clio Legal Trends Report. So it is a mix. We use Clio application data that's been aggregated and anonymized. Now, I want to be very clear about this. One, it is not the files of the lawyers and their client information that's being stored in Clio, but instead it's usage data on how law firms are using Clio. So an example I like to give is that of billable rates. I can see that a law firm has a very low billable rate, except for whatever reason. And a law firm over here might have a very high billable rate. I couldn't tell you which law firms they are. And then I can see a bell curve of rates in between those 2 points. And then when I combine those with something like how often is a feature being used, I can start extrapolating certain data. All of this is contributed by the law firms that participate in this, and it's something you can turn off in Clio. We also find that a lot of this data actually raises more questions than answers. So we've been combining it now for 5 years with surveys of legal and consumer people within the legal industry, so lawyers and clients. And lastly, we've been able to start and continue what's called a longitudinal study, where we're able to take a look at a cohort of data and see how it changes over time. And all of this means that the Legal Trends Report has access to data that the legal industry has never seen before. And I think it's really starting to change the way we understand how to practice law and how to improve the practice of law. So I hope that clears up where we're getting all this information.
That's really useful. And I think, Clio, with its significant market share, is really uniquely positioned to make those original observations and put that together in a report. I think that's really, really cool that Clio has the time to do that every year. I know it's a lot of work.
Yeah, I'm not going to lie, it is. But I actually really enjoy it. It's one of my favorite things that we do.
I bet. So let's dive in. Again, there's a lot of great data in this year's report, but we kind of hand selected 5 trends that we thought were the most interesting, the most actionable, and good to unpack today a little bit. So that said, I'm going to dive us into the first trend. For each one, I'll show what the trend is right from the report that we're drawing attention to, and I'll put a chart or something interesting to look at on screen. But the first trend that really caught my eye was this one, and the headline is "The technology field has leveled." So in Clio's research, they found that in the last year, you can see these stats on screen, 85% of law firms were using some form of software to manage their firm. 83% were meeting clients virtually. 79% of law firms were storing data in the cloud in some tool, maybe not all of their data, but some of their data. 73% of law firms accepted online payments, and 62% of law firms supported electronic signatures. Now, if you look at the last year and a half, I don't think anyone's surprised by the mass adoption of technologies like virtual meetings, right? I mean, I don't think that's a shock to anybody. But what did stand out to me when I look at these numbers is the very high adoption rate of 3 things in particular: storing data in the cloud. And I remember not too long ago when there was a lot of anxiety about that in the legal community, accepting online payments, and supporting electronic signatures. And according to the data, the overwhelming majority of these law firms in the surveys that you mentioned, Joshua, say, yes, we plan to keep these tools in place long after the pandemic is behind us. So my question for you, to kind of help us interpret this, what does that adoption rate tell you about today's modern law firm?
I think it tells us that necessity is the mother of invention within many law firms. The last year and a half, as you mentioned, has been a sea change in how people practice law, how people work, how people tackle their day-to-day lives, right? We've become more dependent on technology than ever before. And the modern law firm is embracing this, seeing benefits from each change that they're making along the way, and finding that there's no reason to go back to how they were doing it before, that there are better ways of handling this type of workflow, and they're going to stick with it. But it did take a moment of change where we collectively had to address these issues to bring everybody up to this level.
Absolutely. I think you're absolutely right on. So if 95% of law firms, according to your surveys, are saying we're not changing this, right? This is the new, better way, pandemic or no, what would you say maybe to that 5% of law firms that fall outside of that majority, that don't necessarily want to keep or adopt some of these technologies?
Well, for them, we don't want to presume too much, right? While we can see a lot of benefits, and we'll be talking about some of the benefits from these technologies along the way, one of the things that we also discuss at Clio and the Legal Trends Report is how to be client-centered. And it could be that for those 5% who aren't going to continue using these tools in the future, is that their particular practice area, their particular geography, and their particular clients may necessitate a shift away. It's just that's their client-centric approach. So while I do want to encourage everyone to look at the learnings of the Legal Trends Report, they're not the one and only way to practice law. They're just what we see emerging as the trend right now. And so take it with a grain of salt and find what works for you, your clients, in your practice area.
That makes a lot of sense. That makes a lot of sense. So the second trend that stood out to us is around the technology diffusion curve, which I love saying about, and how that applies to the legal tech world. So what you're seeing on screen here, and this is again right from this year's Legal Trends Report, is the Everett Rogers theory on technology adoption, and what any new technology and kind of how adoption looks in the beginning phase, in the middle, and as it reaches really that mass adoption. And I think Rogers' theory of technological diffusion is not only universally accurate across any and all technology, but I think we're seeing it really play out. And I think it's particularly relevant this year and next year for law firms. So looking at this from the Legal Trends Report, Joshua, my question for you is, if this initial takeoff, which you kind of see in the chart here, is behind us, or we're just at the end of it, as the chart suggests, what do you think the next 3 to 5 years looks like for legal technology?
Oh, I think we've just scratched the surface on how legal professionals and technology can collaborate. And so what I think we see internally at Clio is that a lot of law firms that come to us with a very specific problem in mind, right? Like, I want to be able to access my files from home or from the office, or I want to be better at tracking time, or I want to get my bills out faster, right? They come with one problem. And so they jump into Clio and use Clio to solve that one problem, but they don't necessarily use the rest of the app to its full potential, right? Because they've come with one problem in mind. And what we're seeing is that the more they become aware of how their technology can benefit them, the more they integrate it into a wider and wider aspect of their practice. So the next 3 to 5 years are going to be all these tools that we rushed to adopt, that we had a really steep learning curves, not to have kind of a curve pun here. We're now going to take a moment and see how to use them better, how to integrate them more. And there are going to be winners and losers, right? The thing that I adopted this year isn't quite the best for my needs. So let's find a better tool. Or, I'm paying for this tool, but I'm only using about half the features. How do I really grab more of this? Then so that I get more value from what I'm spending. So we've really scratched the surface. And importantly, this tech diffusion curve isn't just limited to lawyers, right? We're seeing that clients are also adopting technology and utilizing technology in their day-to-day lives much more. And so one of the things that I want to point out, I think this will lead us to our next point, is that 79% of clients and potential clients saw the option to work remotely with a lawyer as an important factor that would have a positive influence on their decision to hire that lawyer, right? They have a problem. They've identified that a lawyer will help. Now, when they start shopping for a lawyer, they're looking for a lawyer that uses the same type of technology that they have adopted. So this tech diffusion curve is going to be an uplifting of law firms and clients together for the next 3 to 5 years, finding better ways to work together. And if we move to the next slide, we're going to see how big a change that's really going to be.
Before I move to the next slide, I'm going to ask you to speculate perhaps a little bit here, but how much of technology adoption in the legal world do you expect is driven by clients specifically, clients asking for communication, better tools, and how much is driven more from a internal operations or perhaps growing revenue kind of perspective, client driven versus firms driven?
Well, I don't think they're necessarily divorced, right? The firms that are succeeding tend to have adopted tools that are a win-win for both lawyers and clients. I do know from the International Legal Technology Survey, the International Legal Technology Association survey, that more and more business-related practice areas are seeing their clients come with certain demands as it relates to technology, whether it's around security or transparency. And those are the clients who are really driving that adoption in those practice areas. And what we're seeing in kind of the people-facing law practice areas is it is more the law firm trying to figure out how to handle a huge potential client base that needs technology to enable their access to justice. So it's a mix of the two that's driving that forward. But there are some real benefits once you do adopt this technology. For example, we've seen that law firms that adopt online payments tend to be paid 39% faster than by any other means out there, right? So if you're waiting on a client to write a check, you're going to be waiting. And firms that are using online payments, it's not just about getting paid faster. They actually tend to see more cases per month when they are very upfront about having that option available. So they have close to 10% more cases than firms that just don't utilize that feature. So that's an example of things that clients expect, the ability to pay quickly and easily, like every other service in their life, driving law firm success.
That makes sense. I think we can certainly relate at Uptime Legal. There's many different drivers. Many of them are client driven. And to your point, I agree, they're not the two. We'll see a lot of demand around security and compliance, often related to a new client with higher requirements than perhaps the law firm is used to. But that is a good segue into really the third trend of ours that, again, caught our attention, and that is around client communication preferences. I found this chart particularly insightful, and as you can see by the chart, the preference for in-person and phone communication, which is dark green and slightly lighter green on the chart here, is the vast majority of the bar, but we're certainly seeing that shift. And this is a perfect, goes back to what you just said, Joshua, in terms of clients are either preferring or in some cases strongly preferring, perhaps demanding, virtual or other options.
Yeah, and what's interesting about this chart is this is actually our data from 2018. So as we move forward, we're going to see that this is shifting greatly just within the last 3 years. So in 2018, lawyers and clients both preferred in-person or telephone communication in the vast majority of activities together. But as we move forward a little bit, we're going to see that that's shifted and how the clients now prefer to communicate. So I'm sorry, Dennis, I interrupted there.
No, that's okay. I think I would love to see this and then the next 5 years forward, if I could move into the future and I would say that money, that the darker shades on this bar chart are going to be less, right?
Yeah.
The analogy,
I see more and more purple.
Absolutely. Absolutely. Like, an analogy outside of legal is like telehealth. I think at first telehealth was thought of as, I guess it'll get us through this time. And now I think the thinking is we should have been doing this all along. This is great. And I think that the practice of law and serving legal clients, that's certainly going to be the same as well.
Mhm.
Are there any other shifts or trends that you've noticed, Joshua, or that the report discovers around client communication practices?
So video communication actually continues to grow in terms of preference. It's moved into the top three methods. So here we had in-person, phone, and email were our top three in pretty much every category. And now video conferencing has moved into the top three. In fact, it beats out email in almost every instance. And the reason for that is we think clients are looking for synchronous communications, not just the ability to get an update, but also the ability to ask a question at the same time. And it's that back and forth that's really leading clients to value this new technology that's just become a part of their lives, right? They can grab their mobile phone, turn on FaceTime or Zoom or Microsoft Teams and have a conversation in a way that they couldn't before and still get all the benefits of that face-to-face communication, that non-verbal communication that is so much of a part of our conversation. They can have that from the convenience and safety of their own home.
Yeah, absolutely. My last question for you on or around communication is, you kind of mentioned a few different names and tools. There's so many out there: Zoom, Teams, there's Slack, there's client portals. What would you say are the most important tools if you only had the bandwidth to adopt one or two new tools, say this next year? What would you say are the top tools?
Well, I think video conferencing is now table stakes. Everybody's got it, right? So I think the next is, depending on the type of law firm you are and how you go about your business development, you either need a client intake tool, something where clients can identify themselves and start to drive forward their own purchase of your legal services, or you need a client portal, something where your current clients can manage and collaborate with you on the matters that they already have existing. So again, it depends on your practice area and like your stable of clients, but both of those are going to contribute really well to the communication with clients and drive forward your own law firm success.
I would agree. I would say, of course, those two are not mutually exclusive. You can and potentially should do both.
Yeah.
So our fourth trend, again, that we identified as really, really compelling is around document sharing and other resource sharing. So you can see in the chart here, the method by which documents and various resources that are being shared by law firms to their clients is shifting, just like communication is shifting. So as a technology professional by trade, I am personally very happy to see the rise of adoption and embracing of these kinds of technologies, client portals, saving data in the cloud. In particular, again, I recall, as I said not too long ago, there was a lot of anxiety about that, about ownership of data and security and compliance. And I think I'm going to use your term, it's kind of becoming table stakes these days, which is great. I'm also very happy to see, other tools take the place of email to share documents with, say, your clients or third party. I think email is great at communication and terrible at file sharing. So that's my take. This, to me, this is all really good news. That said, Joshua, I'd love your take. What do you see happening around document sharing, both in person and I'll call email kind of old school method of sharing documents? Do you see that continuing to decline?
Yeah, 100%. Right now, we see right off the bat that 60% of legal clients actually prefer a secure client portal as a means of sharing documents. And it's not just that they want the ease of access, they want the security that comes with it. They are becoming aware of this. And one of the stats in the Legal Trends report is that while they expect this type of sharing, they also expect the law firm to do it in a secure fashion. And so it is a bit of a double-edged sword that lawyers need to be both aware and responsible for that security, but it's becoming a preferred method. I think it's going to dominate transactional practices, right? Where they're document heavy, there's a lot of back and forth, and especially for practice areas that have business clients or kind of business activities like the acquisition of a business, you're going to see that there's a workflow that this digital sharing of documents can support. So rather than I send out like 8 copies and then everybody signs their copy, and then we kind of do this musical chair as it goes back and forth. Instead, I can set up a workflow where one person gets a copy, they sign it, it then automatically goes to the next person, to the next. And that type of design workflow is going to be advantageous to the lawyer in terms of managing the whole thing and a better client experience. Litigation will use collaborative technologies, including that with the courthouse, to share documents as a part of their files and to make sure that their clients have the most up-to-date version of the documents that relate to them. So it's going to be a great way to handle that. I think there are going to be a couple of exclusions for some of these things. I think real estate, unfortunately, will still require at certain times in-person document sharing and signing, just because the state laws haven't changed yet enough to enable that in every instance. And so it is going to be a little patchy for the next couple of years, but we're only going to see this preference for online storage, online security, and everything being a part of their legal experience being online is just going to rise.
I certainly hope so. I'm hopeful that, any states that are a little bit behind in that way catch up soon. I'm confident or hopeful that they will. So let me ask you this. What would you say to a law firm that, in terms of getting documents out to clients, and I realize there's other parties beyond clients, but I'm going to use clients for now, that still is using plain old email, or perhaps, I don't want to pick on any one product, but perhaps some other basic file sharing tool or service out there that isn't part of their case management or isn't part of their document management. What would you say to that firm, or maybe posed another way? What is the pitch, if you will, or the case for that integrated client portal and practice management tool?
So the pitch for the law firm is security. Having control of the documents and making sure that they're living up to your ethical and malpractice standards is something you should be considering while choosing these tools. That being said, the thing that your clients will most appreciate, they expect the security. For them, that's table stakes. But they will appreciate the ease of use in interacting with these documents and the law firm. And so you get the security. That's what you should invest in. But the bonus is happier clients. And that's what I say to these law firms that are still using email. We now know that email, unfortunately, does not have the expectation of privacy that it used to have. And we're starting to see ethical opinions come out that say there is a time and a place for email in communicating with clients, but there is also a time to exercise your judgment on when it is not the right tool. And secure client portals are where you turn when email is not the right tool.
Absolutely. And then, of course, you're not dealing with spam filters, junk email attachment size limits. I would argue security is certainly the most important reason to adopt a tool like this, but I would argue that there's many of other benefits as well. Okay, so for our fifth and final trend, this one's my favorite, and I deliberately saved what I feel is the best for last, and that is trend number 5, the relationship between technology adoption and growing law firms. So this portion of the legal trends report, again, for those of you who haven't read it, it stood out to me when I saw it. I immediately reread it, and then I shared it with my internal team, and I said, we need to talk about this, and we need to talk about this with our clients. And I'll provide some background, and Joshua, you can certainly correct or add to my description here. But as part of this year's report, Clio performed a number of studies of different law firms and sort of grouped them into 3 different groups, or categorized them into 3 different groups by whether or not and to what degree they're growing. So they grouped them into growing law firms, and we'll call that group 1, and that was law firms that were growing at a clip of 20% year over year or better. stable law firms that revenue was either flat or growing up to 20%. And then, of course, shrinking firms whose revenue was decreasing on a year-over-year basis. Then Clio analyzed the adoption of a number of specific technologies, which I'll explain in a second, across each group and looked for correlations. And I found the data striking. So here are, I'm going to walk all of you guys through a couple of quick charts here because I think it's worth looking at each one individually. Here's the correlation. By the way, Joshua, did I misstate anything there? Was that right?
No, 100% revenue growth over a period, over 100% revenue growth over a period of 5 years for these growing law firms. It was ridiculous. They doubled their revenue. What was very interesting is what they didn't double. They didn't double the number of cases they were handling. They didn't double the number of practice areas they were servicing. They didn't double the number of employees they had, but they doubled their revenue. And that's what really stood out to me. And they did so by using these tools that you're going to point out.
Absolutely, yes. That's what I found so interesting. So the three groups, the first group doubled in 5 years. And what do they have in common? So here, I'm going to walk you guys briefly through a couple of stats here. So that first group, the growing group, we'll call it, were 73% more likely to accept online payments. You can see in this chart. That same group of law firms, the growing group, are 51% more likely to use client portals. That growing group of law firms are 46% more likely to use an intake or CRM tool. And growing law firms, that same group, are twice as likely to adopt and measure and report on KPIs or key performance indicators. So for me, the correlation is clear. And for me, the big takeaway is law firms that adopt technology do better and grow. And to your point, Joshua, not necessarily through brute force, not necessarily through expanding into new practice areas or taking on new cases. So again, there's obviously a correlation between adopting technologies, and we've named what those specific technologies are in this case, although it's certainly not limited to those, and growing and outperforming. But that said, Joshua, what's your takeaway on this data?
I think the simple takeaway is that, especially with that last one, your firm reporting tools, you should begin measuring and then act upon those measurements. And so the one measurement or key performance indicator, the KPI, that we saw consistently improving in these growing law firms was utilization. The amount of their day that they spent on legal activities, billable activities, versus the amount of their day that they spent on non-billable administrative activities. They were able to slowly but consistently increase their billable activities and decrease their administrative. All of these tools that we talked about are administrative or data entry type tools, right? And by decreasing that workload of administrative work, they were able to increase the amount of time that they got to be the lawyers that their clients needed. And so my big takeaway is start to measure at least your utilization rate. It's actually its own dashboard within Clio, so we try to make that easy for you. And then start to act on which of these tools or which other processes can decrease the burden of that administrative work.
Absolutely. You can't improve what you don't measure. And if you don't know your numbers, you don't know your business. I'm leaving this one on screen for another second because I wanted to really for everybody. I think this is a really important one. So, okay, those are the 5 trends. Those are the trends that when we at Uptime Legal read it, we found the most eye-opening. But again, I do want to stress to everyone that there's a lot of additional valuable data in the report that we didn't cover, that we simply didn't have time for. But I think the question becomes, let's just focusing on those 5 for now. What are the actionable takeaways? What can a law firm do? What can they implement from that data? What actions should a law firm, here we are in December, should a law firm implement and make part of their 2022 plan? So to me, again, the entire legal trends report pretty clearly demonstrates and quantifies that law firms that embrace and adopt technology do better, serve their clients better, grow, make more money, and achieve, I think, whatever their goals are for their firm, which is obviously different from the firm. So saying you should embrace technology more, that's kind of a vague statement and not particularly helpful, I think. So one of my favorite parts of the legal trends report is how it quantifies that. And again, Joshua, tell me if I'm misquoting any of this, but at one point, the trends report quantifies the impact. It picked three of these technologies that we've covered, and it quantifies the impact across a number of firms. So for instance, firms that adopted an online intake system, adopted online payments, and adopted some form of client portal. And I think the data set shows that when law firms did all three, they saw about $43,000 in additional revenue per lawyer. And I found that really interesting because it is not this, vague sort of cryptic, if you do this, it'll go better. You guys quantified it. What did I miss, or what did I misstate, if anything?
So I think you nailed it. So we actually broke down in our 2020 report, the early adopters of these technologies just showed that they were making more money and were better able to handle the disruption of 2020. And we were able to quantify each of those tools. Each tool added like tens of thousands of dollars in additional revenue per lawyer. When combined, they actually had kind of a fusion effect. And so you see, it was on average an estimated $43,000 in additional revenue per lawyer. For solo lawyers, it's actually closer to $56,000 when they adopted these technologies, because their administrative burden is so much higher, I think. So I think the return on investment for these tools in both subscriptions for acquiring them and for the time in implementing them is very worthwhile. And so if you need an argument for why you should take 2 or 3 days, evaluate a couple tools, figure out which one will best serve you and your clients, and then implement it, an additional $10,000 to $15,000 per tool is a very easy case to make. And that's why we want lawyers to recognize that these are investments and not just kind of band-aids to patch over your law firm for the last year and a half, but where you set your law firm up for future success as well.
Well said. I couldn't agree more. So I want to take a minute and talk briefly about putting it all together, right? I mean, how does a law firm go about actioning on these trends? How does a law firm go about maybe working through maybe some new ideas that came from the trends report, or just other technology initiatives that are on the radar? So what we advise our clients to do is, just like your law firm presumably has maybe some form of business plan or strategic plan and maybe a marketing plan, we always advise that our clients have a technology plan for your law firm. Really as part of your overarching strategic plan. And it doesn't have to be overly sophisticated. I think the best way to approach a technology plan for your law firm is to develop what we call a legal technology roadmap. And really that is just a list of tools or initiatives that you want to take on in a given year or say 3-year period, really ranked and prioritize it by impact, right? Maybe you've got 10 things you'd like to improve, to your point, Joshua, that within your firm. Maybe one around client communication, maybe one around data security. So we always encourage what's going to have the biggest impact. And that's how we advise law firms rank and prioritize that. And usually whatever those initiatives are, having lots and lots and lots of conversations with our clients and prospective clients, they usually revolve around the 6 pillars that you see on screen, right? They're usually around, at some level, practice management, document management, accounting, and yes, all those kind of interrelate and overlap a little bit. Collaboration and community within your law firm has become very front and center, of course. Security and compliance is often a driver for having these kinds of thoughts and conversations, and general technology support. So the reason I show these on screen is when you're thinking about what tools to implement, what initiatives to execute on this year, I always advise people kind of have these 6 pillars in mind. and then map out what you think you can reasonably accomplish in a year, right? I hear a lot of time from prospective customers or existing customers, man, there's so much. How do we, this is just overwhelming and daunting. So the answer is, I think, the same way you solve any big problem, which is to say you break it up into smaller pieces, ranked by priority and urgency, and work through it. So developing that roadmap and more importantly, executing on it. Easy to say, I think very hard to do, or certainly work to do. So we often advise to law firms that you get the help of a legal technology advisor of some form or fashion. And by way of example, that's exactly what we do here at Uptime Legal. We help law firms develop that big picture, a legal technology plan, and we provide a suite of services that in many cases is the easy button for some of these things. That's a total technology plan for a typical Uptime Legal client often looks like some combination of services we provide directly and services provided by our close friends and partners such as Clio. So if any of that is on your radar, or if you just want to have that big picture discussion about your firm's technology, definitely give us a call or visit us at uptimelegal.com. So closing the loop. Again, I'm going to say this for probably the third time. Lots of great stuff in this year's report. Outside of what we covered today, I certainly encourage everyone to get your own copy, which you can find at clio.com/LTR.
Dennis, can I mention one other thing about going to that URL, that website? We actually have some tools there as well. So one of the things that we track is the average billable hour per lawyer and per non-lawyer across 40 different practice areas across the United States. And so you can go enter your own practice area and billable hour rate and see how it compares to our data for your state and figure out, are you the boutique offering that should be charging more than the average rate, or are you a volume type law firm and you can maybe get by on a lesser rate, and you can really start to compare against real data rather than just kind of what came across the water cooler or your email list. And so please swing by, read the report, use these tools. They're for everybody's benefit.
I think price is a very important piece of strategic planning for any law firm. That's fantastic. So in closing, if you guys would like to learn more about Clio Manage, which has a lot of these tools, obviously client portal and KPI and all the things that help law firms build better practices, you can scan or click the link or the QR code here to book a demo for Clio. If this is on your agenda at all, I would certainly encourage you guys to see Clio Manage for yourself. And if any of you guys are looking to develop or execute on your legal technology plan, your legal technology roadmap, you can scan this code on the right to book a consult with our team here at Uptime Legal. So that wraps it up, folks. I hope everybody learned something and found this insightful and more importantly, actionable. I want to thank you, Joshua, for taking the time to meet with us and unpack some of these trends today. Mm-hmm. And I want to thank all of you who joined us today for attending, and wish you guys all the best in 2022.
Thank you, Dennis. There's one question I wanted to address that came in from the audience. It's from Brett, who asked, is there a breakdown of communication preferences by age category? We actually did do a breakdown of communication preferences. And what we found is baby boomers, Gen X, millennials, the majority of them all preferred the inclusion of a remote option. Baby boomers were the lowest amount at 59%, but it was still like the majority all want remote options as a part of legal services. So I hope this makes you take a look at your client audience, your potential client base, and realize they're all seeking this. It's just a question of how do you implement it that works best for you and them.
My mother just started using Zoom, which I'm very excited about.
Oh yeah, that's so cool.
I think schools knows no bounds in terms of demographics. So my anecdotal observation.
My toddler and my mom FaceTime each other like every other day. Awesome. It's just their baseline experience now for communicating with each other. Oh.
Were there any other questions that we can address before we wrap?
I think that's it. Yeah.
Excellent. Thank you again, Joshua, for coming. Thank you, all of you who attended, and have a great 2022.
Take care, everybody.